My guest today is singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and music producer Buck Johnson. Now, he is the keyboardist and backing vocalist for the legendary rock band Aerosmith, as well as the Hollywood Vampires and the Joe Perry Project, and he is currently on tour with Ringo Starr. Now, as a versatile entertainer, Buck's artistry encompasses American rock and roll with a unique, soulful flair that comes from his gospel roots and creating a sound and style all of his own. Now, Buck releases his highly anticipated album, Tongue and Groove, and the album is a rock and roll experience with the soulful depth of a seasoned storyteller. Now, packed with the blistering guitar riffs, haunting melodies, and lyrics that cut to the bone, Tongue and Groove is a fearless tribute to resilience, drawing its strength from the timeless concept of the tongue and groove woodworking joint, a symbol of enduring connection and strength against life's fiercest storms. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome singer, songwriter, and already on his way of becoming a rock and roll legend, the one and the only Buck Johnson, to the show. Welcome back, Buck.
Hey, thanks for having me. So great to be back.
I will tell you this, before we talk about your amazing new album, Tongue and Groove, which has to be one of the best rock albums of the year, especially according to my ears, I have to ask, and we'll get the elephant out of the room first. I know that we've all heard about the Aerosmith announcement about their retirement, but was this retiring from touring or from recording or both?
Well, as the press release says, retired from touring. You know, I think those guys, this is what they've known all their lives. So I can't imagine them just hanging everything up. But that's just me speculating. That's nothing they've said to me directly. But I can imagine them maybe a year later doing a one-off, or maybe right. They're always going to be creating, recording, possibly. I don't see them putting out any new albums as a band, but individually, yeah, they're going to stay creative and do what they do. I just think the grind of a tour for that band where they are at their age is probably over.
All right. Well, we'll leave it right there, and we'll just see what time brings us in the future with all of the members of Aerosmith. But I want to talk about this incredible new album of yours, Tongue and Groove. And I know that we have talked about the opening track of this album in the previous interview, which is Just Feel Better. And but this whole album, it's very personal to you, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think music is, if you're a songwriter, it becomes personal. Even if you're writing about someone else's experience, it's usually a universal emotion or feeling. That's what you hope for, that everyone can understand and relate to. But this album is a collection of older songs and newer songs that all seem to fit together, and Tongue and Groove is the title track that I wrote during the pandemic, or coming out of the pandemic, I should say. My father had passed away. And when I was a kid growing up in Shady Grove, Alabama, we lived in this old craftsman style home. And he was really proud of it because he said, this home is built tongue and groove and it'll withstand any storm. And he would say that to me when there would be tornado warnings or something. And I was just a little kid. So after he passed away, that just title came to me, that thought. And of course, it has a lot more meaning, especially coming out of a pandemic, withstanding the storm. And in my relationship with my wife, we just celebrated our anniversary last week. So she's been behind me all the way. I wouldn't be where I am without her. So there's songs about that, about friends. Just Feel Better was about a close friend who tragically passed away. But there's always trying to leave a glimmer of hope. And even in these stories that don't necessarily seem to end well, I think there is an idea, a thought that, like in Just Feel Better, where if it's okay to ask for help and that there is hope in the end. So anyway, I think all these songs fit together like tongue and groove. So there you go.
Yeah, this album is so great to listen to. Now, have you had the opportunity to perform some of the songs live yet?
A little bit, I've done some, like, where I've done clinics for like companies like Guitar Center, and I'll play acoustically or with a keyboard. And I've done a handful of shows here and there, but I'm busy touring with these other guys that like I'm in Omaha today, so with Ringo Starr, and so hopefully soon when I'm off the road doing this, then I'll get the opportunity to play some shows, hopefully in the Southeast. That's what I'm hoping to do, and we're looking to do that.
Well, let's kind of go through some of these songs on this album. And the one that really opened up my ears because I was not expecting this particular arrangement. And the song Living the Life is a very fun song to listen to. And again, I love the arrangement. I mean, it's upbeat, it's happy, it's so good that I could literally hear this song in a movie soundtrack. I mean, what was the inspiration behind the actual arrangement of this song?
Well, it definitely has, I think, to me, a sort of a Beatle influence to it, because it's a short, quick, up tempo, kind of some would say pop sensibility. And I'm always thinking melody and a chorus that people can sing along with. That's the goal. I wrote this song with my good friend and collaborator, Charlie Midnight and James Hicks. And that combination has written a few other songs like Live for the Song, which is also on the record. I wrote the song at a time where my band had actually ended, and I was in Nashville, and I had have a studio, and I have a publishing deal, so I'm writing songs. But it was kind of a dark time for me because I wasn't sure where do I go from here. Sometimes things happen. It's timing. You make plans and things change, and then you got to pick yourself up and figure out what to do next. And so I was in a dark place, and thanks to James, he kind of brought the title in, and it just clicked. And I'm like, you know what? This was a kind of a memo to myself, a mantra, how fortunate I have it, in life. And I really wanted to express that fun, uplifting vibe about it because, I am living the life, and, I'm so lucky and blessed.
Yeah, that, I mean, the song, I think out of all of the songs on this album, because of this particular arrangement, it really sticks out.
Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah.
And in an excellent way, too.
Oh, good, good. I was going to say, at first, I didn't really have the song on the album, and I had sent the Rose Pony, the label involved with it. I sent them a bunch of other songs, and they immediately said, "Why isn't this song on the record?" And I'm like, I mean, sometimes you can't see, what's in front of you as an artist, and so it was good to have that feedback, and of course I embrace it now. If it stands out, I think that's in a good way.
The thing that caught my ear on this album, for me, this is a rare album where you can sit down and you love every song.
Wow.
We all know that when albums come out, we always will gravitate to two, three tracks, maybe four that we really like to listen to over and over again. We may skip over the others. No, this is not that album. This album, you want to listen to every song because even yesterday, I was telling my wife and daughter, who are huge Aerosmith fans and Hollywood Vampire fans, and my daughter just loves Joe Perry, and I said, you've got to hear Buck's brand new album. I said, every song on this album could be played on the radio. And that is very rare today. I mean, you have this amazing collection of songs that, I mean, your management could pick any song and place it on the radio and people would fall in love with it.
Wow. Well, thanks for saying that. I just try to write great songs that mean something to me, and like I said, hopefully are universal. They mean to others. I just try to assemble what I think fits together. Now, I do think on this record there are some variety stylistically a little bit, but I've embraced that. And like I said, I do think they fit together like tongue and groove because there is a connection, a thread through all of them, whether it's Living the Life, which is this up tempo, fun song with fun sensibility, or Just Feel Better, which is a little darker. And then you have a Live for the Song, which is about doing what I do, and traveling the country and the world and playing music, and how much you live for the song. And not just me as an artist, but for the fans, the people who come to shows. And we wouldn't be able to do this without that, especially today's world, where artists depend on playing live music as their main source of income. And so, the fans are a big part of that.
I really like the fact that you led this album off with "Just Feel Better," because
Mhm.
normally when someone like you, a singer songwriter writes this monster hit, a lot of them when they come out with a solo album usually place that type of song last. But I
Mhm.
like the fact that you placed it first because it sets the listener up already going, "Oh yeah, I know that song. I love that song," and they're already set up to listen to the next track and the next track. But you have a song on this album, Live for the Song, which sounds like the classic power ballad that we've been missing on the radio for the last 15 years. I mean,
Wow.
even when I was listening to the lyrics, and I really pictured like Robert Johnson at the crossroads with this
Mm.
song. So what's the story behind this one?
Well, this is another, like I mentioned before, collaboration with Charlie Midnight and James Hicks. And, I mean, I don't have that many collaborators. I mean, I write for other situations with other writers. But for me as an artist, you kind of have your posse, the people that you've known, that you relate to, they know me, and we just click. Especially Charlie Midnight, who, by the way, I have to mention he's up for an Emmy for a song he wrote for the tattoo artist of Auschwitz, that's with Barbara Streisand singing, and so he wrote the lyric for that song. Anyway, he's just been a mentor and incredible collaborator. And this song is about, like I mentioned, it's you know talks about traveling, riding on a bus, and all these things, but it's not to sound like you're complaining at all. It's just that, look, no one, if you get into this business, I don't recommend it if you're doing it to be famous or to get rich, because you're not, most likely. I'm certainly not. And it's just, music is a calling. Music chose me. And so it's telling the story about all this traveling, and but being away from your loved ones and all these things that you have to sacrifice, but it's all worth it when you hit the stage, because you live for the song. And the fans feel it too. It's expensive nowadays to go see a concert, and thankfully people feel like it's still worth their time and their money, and hopefully you make it worth it for them, because it should be an emotional, visceral experience for everybody in that room.
Yeah, because when I was listening to all of the songs on the album, I kept thinking every song on here is the perfect song to play live. Because
Yeah.
I will hear albums from artists where maybe the album is very mellow, and I'm like, singing, a let's say someone's got a set and they're going to do 14 songs in a set, and 80% of those are mellow. I'm thinking,
Mhm.
how do you keep the audience paying attention and energized? But this album, I want to hear every song live because this is that type of album. I mean, this reminds me of the albums that I would listen to back in the late 70s and into the 80s, and then I would go buy the concert ticket and watch them perform all of their songs. This is that type of album.
Well, I'm like you. I those kind of albums. I've mentioned this before. I'm from Alabama, and I grew up singing gospel, Southern gospel, with my family. And I had older cousins who turned me on to those great classic albums, especially English artists. The Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, and other American artists of the same sort, like Aerosmith. And those albums are, they're the symphonic pieces of our generation. They tell a story. There, every song connects to the next. And side A tells one story. Side B, we start again. It's the second set, right? And I would, as a producer, I would, if I'm working with a young artist, I would encourage that. Okay, like, what are you going to open your show with? What are you going to close your show with? Do you have that on here? Especially if it's your first album, and maybe you'll have to do some covers. That's okay. Make it your own. But you're right, though. You would. I'm glad you said that too, because I really feel that I wanted an album of those kind of records where I could play this whole album live and you feel like you got a complete show.
What and here's the thing. I was thinking about that because if you literally walked on stage, Buck, and you played and you performed all of these songs in the order that's on the album, the
Mm,
first song and the last song perfectly bookend the whole album.
yeah,
Yeah,
great.
because even the last song, you're ready to
Mhm.
party.
Good. I mean, yeah, it, I learned this from my parents. It's like, how you start a song and how you end it is real important, and how you start a show and how you end a show is also important. Whatever happens in between, hopefully no disasters happen, but as long as you start strong and finish strong. In that last song, if I could only be sure, a good friend of mine, Alan Mason, recommended that song to me. Uh, Nolan Porter is the artist. It's a cover, and the song was, even though Nolan's an American artist, it was never a hit, but it was a hit in England, and was considered the Northern Soul movement in the '70s, and he's very familiar with it because Alan Mason is. Well, he was a music supervisor, who he still is. In fact, he's honored from the Music Supervision Guild, um, with an Icon Award. He did every Barry Levinson film, and so songs like out movies like Benny and June, Rain Man. He did all those movies. Good Morning Vietnam. So he knows a lot of songs, and we're friends. And he said, "Hey, you know what? This is one of my jewels that I think no one's ever really made a hit out of it. I think you could do this, Buck." And so I do it quite different than the original, but it has a great riff, and I love doing the song, and like I said, as I would tell another artist, I sort of try to do the best job to make it my own, like it sounds like one of my songs.
Well, the whole album is like that. I mean, if I didn't know that the last song on the album was from the 70s, I swear
Mm.
you wrote it.
Well, thank you, thanks.
Because like you said, you put your own style, your own flavor into it, and I think everybody who gets the album Tongue and Groove is going to think that every single song on here is penned by Buck Johnson.
Well, all but that one. There's 9 songs in one cover, or 8 songs in one cover, so 9 songs total. And it just felt like, if I can only be sure. I mean, as a songwriter, as an artist, I want the best combination, the best songs, whether I wrote them or not. A lot of my heroes, you know, necessarily didn't write every song that was on their record. Whether it was Rod Stewart, I mean Elvis, and a lot of other great bands like the Beatles did covers. So you just try to find the combination that works the best. And there are a lot of other songs that I could have put on this record, but I had to, like, okay, restrain myself. What works best in this combination, and that leaves room for the next record. So,
Well,
which I
that's what I was going to say. Save them for the next one because it's funny because some of the artists that have come out with albums this year, I'm looking at the song count and I'm seeing 12, I'm seeing 14, and I'm like, why? You could have saved those for the next one, and you probably wouldn't have had to work so hard. but but there's a song on this album. Uh, who do you think you are? Has
Mm.
this very Aerosmith like sound to it. And I can see why you are the perfect backup vocalist for Steven Tyler. This song rocks on this album.
Yeah, man, I wanted to have a good rocker on there, and in the vein of Aerosmith, or has a Stones kind of vibe to it, and it's an older song. It's just, I had it around, and I wrote it with a friend of mine, Warren Hewitt, who's a great producer, and he back in, when I was living in Los Angeles, his girlfriend at the time he was in love with left him, and he was heartbroken. And I had this melody, this idea, and I'm just scatting words. And he said, "Oh, who do you think you are?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, that title's been written a lot, whatever." But I could tell he was really into it, and I'm like, "Okay, let's go with it. Let's write this." And so it was the kind of a story that maybe in an instance I mentioned before, where I don't know if I personally have felt that emotion, but I certainly got on board like an actor would take on a role with this song. And it's a lot of fun, and it's the kind of song I would need in a set. You need this up tempo rocker, and I get to use that kind of side of myself on this song. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I love singing the song. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think the fans, when they not only hear the album, but when you go on tour with it and they hear that song live, yeah, it's going to be putting a big smile on a lot of people's faces. Now, you said you grew up in Alabama. Have
Mhm.
you recorded in Muscle Shoals?
No, I've always wanted to. I have friends who live there. I did a show recently in Nashville with the drummer from Jason Isbell's band who lives in Muscle Shoals, and you know, I've had many friends record albums in Muscle Shoals, and I just haven't never got the opportunity. But maybe one day. I mean, I've kind of got a system set up in Nashville where there's a couple studios I love to use and musicians that I just mesh with, and then I have my own studio. So I go in and record the basic tracks, drums, bass, and rhythm guitars, and then I can take everything back to my studio and do vocals and overdubs, and saves me some money. And anyway, but it would be a great experience. I mean, I think maybe one of the albums, like I've got album number 2 and album number 3 in the queue already. I got like half of those done. The concepts of what they will be and the songs. But it'd be fun to do more of a pure live experience. That could be a whole nother discussion about how to make records in the future. We've since the 90s have been able to, with technology, make records sound so much better, supposedly, by perfecting them. We can fix this, we can tune vocals, we can line up the drums, and for pop music that's great. But with AI coming stronger and stronger, in the next 10 years, who knows? AI could probably do all that better. And so my feeling is you might as well make the most human record you could possibly make, you know, like we did old school. Like just it's got to be a great song, great players, great performance. And that means getting great tones and sounds. Maybe Muscle Shoals would be the place for that.
Yeah, and I still love the fact that musicians walk into a recording studio and lay down the tracks. And I
Hmm.
understand that there's room for Pro Tools because, you don't want to have to bring everybody back in for half a day to maybe record something when you can fine tune it a bit with Pro Tools or any of the other programs that are out there. But to me, when you bring in the musicians to play on the record, it makes the record so much better.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Pro Tools and all the different applications you can use in recording that have made it easier are just great tools. You don't want to overuse them or rely on them. You know, cutting to 2-inch tape like we used to do back in the day, there is a certain analog sound to that, the saturation of tape that is warm and but I don't know necessarily you have to record on 2-inch tape. It's expensive, it's time consuming. I would never want to record vocals again on 2-inch tape. I used to do that, and it just sucks the vibe out of the room. Waiting for it to roll back, lock in. Now take it again. Oh, you didn't quite get it. Let's do it again. Whereas in Pro Tools, bam, 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 bam. If I'm feeling it, there's no wasted time. I can just get on it and hopefully deliver the motion. Because that again, at the end of the day, that's everything is getting the emotion. Now you can zap all the motion out of it by trying to fix it all. When you're tuning vocals, I mean, there's programs like Melodyne we use, and the thing you want to not you don't want to do is edit with your eyes, but with your ears, because I can look at something and say, oh, that's wrong, but it sounds good to me. It looks wrong, but it sounds great, so we're going to stick with that. So I think there's just a point to where you don't want to overuse those two. It's like carving a piece of art or whittling, wood, and you don't want to go too far. Now you got to throw it out, start over. So, and AI can be a great tool. There's usefulness for that. It's just a little scary how much that it can do everything and take all the human element out of it.
Yeah, and my deal is this: if you're in the studio and you know you're going to tour live with these songs,
Hmm.
make sure when you hit the stage it still sounds like the album, and not
Yeah,
and not perfect the recordings so much with a lot of these programs that when you do it live, people are like, something's off.
yeah.
you know?
Well, and a lot of acts will use Ableton, uh, which is basically the track, and and you find that in all genres: country music, pop music. Um, who's really playing? Well, when I'm playing with Ringo or with Aerosmith or the Hollywood, we're really playing. Now there are some songs where there's like "Don't Want to Miss a Thing." It's full orchestra. Well, we have playback to that, and so we have to do that for the orchestra. But hey, listen, you can't put those kind of artists in a box and expect them and chain them down to a track. That's not the way they operate. And I'm that way too. What if I want to stretch? Steve Lukather's in the Ringo band. What do you think he's going to want to go a little longer on the solo at the end of Rosanna? Well, let's go. That's what people want to see and hear. You
Yeah.
can't.
Now, well, let me ask you that: what
Yeah.
is it like touring with Ringo Starr and all of those legends?
Well, as Colin Hay from Men at Work, who's in the band, says in the show, if you can imagine what it's like to play with Ringo Starr, it's that. It's pretty amazing. It's um, it's surreal. It's unbelievable. You have Colin Hay from Men at Work, Steve Lukather from Toto, Hamish Stewart from the Average White Band, of course Ringo Starr, and Greg Bissonette is the other drummer, and he's a legendary drummer. Played with everybody. And Warren Ham, who's also in Toto, who's played with everybody too. Multi-talented utility, I guess you could say. He plays sax, keys, percussion, you name it. It's just an honor and a pleasure. I guess I don't know what to say. I feel that little bit sometimes. Oh, I'm not worthy, because these guys were like, this is you're in my high school. Toto 4 came out, and Men at Work, all these songs that were, gosh, I don't know, just
I mean, I,
amazing.
I I saw Men at Work live in concert at the height of their popularity, and they sounded just like the album.
Yeah. Colin is an amazing singer and a great guitar player too, and he's a poet. I mean, uh, he just, I mean, I keep telling him, man, he'll recite some poem based on the conversations we were having, and I'm like, man, you need to put this in a book. It's so amazing, and just brilliant, and the vibe, the energy is so positive and uplifting. Ringo does this for. He doesn't need the money. He does it because he loves it. He loves being the camaraderie of musicians and having fun. So if you're in there and not having fun, well, you can go home. So um, I don't know. I just love it. I wish
Well,
it would go longer, but we've got like 2 more weeks, and then I'm home. So
how did you get the phone call from Ringo? Because was it right after Aerosmith announced the retirement?
no, I actually came in June. Ringo usually does a spring tour, and then a early fall tour every year. And like anything in life, and especially in the music business, it's relationships. That's the things. When I talk at these clinics, I can illustrate all these things that people ask about tips and what to do, and I can use all these stories, and we get further along by a lot of times it's more who you are off stage than how good you are on stage, because I mean, there's a lot of talented people who deserve a break. I'm just blessed and fortunate, and maybe I've earned it along the way. But really, relationships are a big part of it. And the tour manager for Ringo Starr has worked with Aerosmith over the years as a road manager, and Edgar Winter was the in the band, and he had he'd gotten sick with COVID, and so he couldn't finish the tour. He couldn't start the tour actually, and so they were like, "Okay, who do you know?" And this guy Donnie Whiteman, the tour manager, recommended me, and so there you go. I mean, it's like I was shocked at first. He was like, "Okay," hey, he calls me up and says, "Hey, Buck, can you just learn the set? We think hopefully Edgar's going to be okay, and I'll pay you to learn the show." And I said, "Sure, man." And hopefully you won't need me. I love Edgar Winter. He's a hero of mine. And so it turned out like the next day he says, "Can you come tomorrow?" It's at Los Angeles. Okay, I guess. So I had to woodshed all night, pull an all-nighter like you would do in college. Um, what's funny is the similar thing happened with Aerosmith. It was a relationship that when Steven says calls Marty Fredrickson up, who's written and produced with Aerosmith. Who do you know? And he recommends me, and then the next day I'm on a plane to Istanbul. So my first show with Ringo in June, I show up. The next day is the first show up in this winery near San Jose. And so we're taking a jet up to San Jose, and we get on the jet and we're about to leave, and the doors open, the plane starts rolling, and it goes right through a hangar. And we're like, "Oh, what happened?" And evidently the ground crew pulled the chocks too soon, and the plane started rolling. So even Ringo said, "Well, that's a first," And so they had to get a second plane, and the second plane mechanical problem. So it took a third plane to make it all the way to San Jose. That meant by the time we got to the venue, it was like you got 15 minutes to get on stage. So not only did I have no rehearsal, there was no sound check. My first time touching Edgar Winter's rig was when I walked on stage to play the first song. So, it's like, okay, go time. And at that point, you just have to rely on your instincts. And I always say, I serve the song. So what does the song need? I want to make sure I can hear everybody and really follow the drummer. And he gives great cues. Greg is an amazing drummer, and really made it easy for me to fall right in. So, during the first song, I see Ringo and Steve Lukather smiling at me, and I'm like, okay, I must be doing something right. So I'm just going to stick with this. And so, yeah, I mean, it's scary, but you have no choice. And so we got through the first show, and as we're getting back on the plane, I'm the last one on the plane. They all gave me an applause, which kind of, I'm like, I can't believe that just happened. So, yeah, man, it's, what can I say?
Man, I mean, see that really that's your experience and being a seasoned musician being tested, and I guess it may have seemed a little scary at the moment, but everything
Yeah.
that you've ever known just comes together and it happens, and that is just the coolest story. I'm just glad that y'all made it to San Jose safely.
We did, and the rest of the tour, no problems. What's funny, this tour started, and we're on our way to the first show of this tour, and we had plane problems, and so we got to the first show here with no sound check. But it was fine at this point. But I mean, everything that I've learned throughout my career, I mean, I realize along the way, I don't realize I didn't know what I know. The things I picked up on, and that's just in all the failures. I always use these sports analogies. I'm a big Alabama fan, and Nick Saban has all these great sayings. He's like, "Don't waste a failure." And I always love that because I think about the things that didn't go right, and it's like, what, that's a good learning thing, and use that. And I'm still have lots to learn. I think you don't want to get complacent. Um, a team, it's hard to get to the top, but it's harder to stay up there. So I'm always thinking I got to work hard. I'm that kid in school that, had to work really hard to get that B, or if you got an A, you really earned it. So I think you have to stick with that mentality because you never know when it could come to an end, or someone else could take your spot.
Yeah, that's it. And are we going to see anything anytime soon? Maybe next year with the Hollywood Vampires?
I believe so. I mean, I think they're looking at Europe tour next summer. Nothing's been announced, but that's kind of the hope that we're thinking. But uh, we'll see when the things are announced. If it's official, then we know it's definitely going to happen. I think they'll do something, and and Joe Perry may do some stuff, and we'll see with Ringo. I'm sort of in the spot filling in for Edgar, and look, I know a lot of the fans would love to see Edgar back on stage with Ringo. So, when next year rolls around, if Ringo decides to go back out and he asks me, I'd love to be there. And if not, then hey, I got to do this. I had this year, and it's an amazing experience, and I made some more fantastic relationships that they off stage is like I said. I mean, they hang with these guys, and I don't need to say anything. I just keep my ears open and hear all these amazing stories.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be adding to some new songs that you're going to be writing in the future. So keep the ears open. And ladies and gentlemen, Tongue and Groove is a collection of songs that Buck had co-written with lifelong collaborators such as Charlie Midnight of James Brown and Joe Cocker and Joni Mitchell fame, as well as self-produced by Buck himself. And this album, it showcases the roots, the rock voice of Buck the Tongue with his classic rock production, The Groove. So Buck enlisted talented musicians and friends on this album, including guitarist Damon Johnson of Leonard Skinner and Alice Cooper, as well as, remember, Brother Kane, and Peter Shroud of Sheryl Crow, as well as Rob McNally of Bob Seger, and drummer Nick Buda of Taylor Swift and Kenny Chesney, and bassist Ted Pecchio of Susan Tedeschi. His new album, Tongue and Groove, drops September 20th, so be sure to get a copy. Head over to buckjohnson.com for the new album, as well as all of his tour dates, because you never know where Buck is going to be touring and who he's going to be touring with. And at this moment, Ringo Starr himself. And Buck, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about this incredible, and I mean honestly and sincerely, an incredible rock and roll album where every song is literally perfect for our ears.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for your kind words. And I hope to see you again soon sometime.
Hey, you bet. You are always welcome back. And ladies and gentlemen, again, head over to buckjohnson.com. Again, Tongue and Groove drops September 20th, so be sure to get a copy. And take it from me, every song should be on the radio, and every song should be a #1 hit. This album is that good. And as for me, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.